Now let's meet our first guest speaker for tonight, Dr. Valene Whittaker. Dr. Whittaker is a military sexual trauma service coordinator and women's health clinic psychologist at the Washington, D.C. Veterans Affairs Medical Center. In these roles, she provides individual and group psychotherapy to women veterans, MST-related consultation, and care coordination to veterans of all genders and education to the medical center community on military sexual trauma, and specializes women's mental health concerns. Dr. Whittaker also facilitates a drop-in race-based stress, trauma, and empowerment group for veterans who identify as Black, Indigenous, and/or people of color, and is a member of the DC VAMC Eating Disorder Treatment Team. Her clinical and research interests include the psychological well-being of people of color, and particularly women of color, Black racial identity, racism, race-related stress and racial trauma, culturally responsive and affirming training and supervision, and trauma recovery and resilience within the veteran, active duty, and military communities. Once again, Dr. Whittaker's talk is entitled VA Healthcare for MST and BIPOC Considerations. Over to you, Dr. Whittaker.
Good evening, everyone. Can I just get a quick wave just to make sure that I'm being heard? And okay, perfect. Oh, a lot of waves. Thank you. And thank you so much, Cassandra, especially for working around your cat to deliver my intro. I really appreciate it. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Give me one moment. Okay, and hopefully that is showing up for folks. Okay, perfect. Great, wonderful. Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Valene Whittaker. As was mentioned in the intro, I am the Military Sexual Trauma Services Coordinator and one of the psychologists in our women's health clinic at the Washington, D.C. VA. Incredibly grateful to be here to address you all this evening, and I'm looking forward to an important discussion. So some of the kind of ground rules in the beginning slide talked a little bit about this, but again, questions are invited and encouraged. Please respect the confidentiality of what's discussed in the space and take whatever time you need, and very appreciative to the mental health professionals who are standing by to offer support for folks, as I know that this is a challenging topic and can be challenging information to sit with. So self-monitor and do what you need to do to take care of yourself and participate to your own capability. I showed this slide in another presentation. Rain has some wonderful grounding techniques for people who have experienced a traumatic event using the 5 senses. So just noticing sensory information using your 5 senses can be a great way to ground during the discussion. So I'll launch right on in to talking a little bit about military sexual trauma and the VA definition of military sexual trauma. It comes from federal law originally. I'm not going to bore you with the federal law piece because it is very detailed and not super easy to understand. Generally, military sexual trauma is defined as sexual assault or sexual harassment that occurred during military service. It can have occurred when somebody is on base, off base, on or off active duty, although there are some caveats around that we could certainly talk about a little bit later. The perpetrator identity could be that of somebody who is also active duty, could also be somebody who's civilian or veteran, retiree, et cetera. The reason or the trigger for the assault or harassment does not matter, it can be any number of things, and it kind of occurred once, only in one form, anything from one incident of sexual harassment to multiple incidents of sexual assault. So when I talk with survivors, generally, the way that I define MST or military sexual trauma is that it is any sort of sexual activity in which someone is involved against their will. So any form of non-consensual interaction that is sexual in nature, and non-consensual at any point during the interaction is also what I stress. So it could have been a set of circumstances that started out as consensual and shifted. If at any point it is non-consensual, for the purposes of VA-related or MST-related VA care, we define that as military sexual trauma. So somebody could be physically forced or coerced into participation, unable to consent, pressured into activities, threatened. Certainly, we know that power is a core component. The engagement of power and control over another person is a key component of military sexual trauma. And we know that for many people, there are instances of coercion and threats from folks who are in higher positions of power over another person. So it can involve any of what's listed on the slide, and certainly anything beyond that as well. Compliance does not mean consent. I want to strongly emphasize that. When people have been asked about their experiences of military sexual trauma, generally it is, I would say, actually much more common than these slides imply. Approximately 1 in 3 women and 1 in 50 men tell their VA healthcare provider that they've experienced military sexual trauma. So keep in mind, though, that prevalence rate is based only on people who have established VA care in some way, shape, or form, people who are choosing to seek VA care, that is, and also is kind of dichotomized because we're talking here about women and men, and however that's been separated and parsed out. The reality is gender is on a continuum, and we understand that it's not just a dichotomized experience for people. These are also folks who have been asked and have explicitly stated if they've had this experience. And so doesn't take into account folks who may have been asked but have declined to state or have said no when the answer was actually yes, because maybe they haven't trusted the provider, or the way they were asked was not affirming or sensitive or responsive. So it's likely that that data is only telling part of the story. The other thing that I always let people know, and kind of the way that I break it down, is that although women experience military sexual trauma in higher proportions, so if we think about the percentage of women, veterans, and former service members who have experienced military sexual trauma, that is higher. However, the actual number of men, given the large number of men who have served in the military, have experienced military sexual trauma is actually larger than the total number of women. And veterans from all eras and all forms of service, all branches, have reported experiencing military sexual trauma. Throughout the presentation, I'm going to be discussing some myths and facts based on common questions that I have received as military sexual trauma services coordinator. I was also taking a look at the questions that were submitted, and so I'm looking forward to addressing some of those through the presentation and then after as needed. But I did want to start out right off the bat with one important myth, which is that military sexual trauma is a female thing. I realize that I'm addressing the Women's Special Interest Group for Survivors Advocacy Network. And so, just kind of taking that with what it is, but I do just want to make sure that I'm emphasizing that military sexual trauma is something that can happen to individuals of any gender identity, and any other range of identities. So although many survivors are significantly impacted in common ways, there are certainly unique impacts that align for survivors who have intersecting identities. So the experiences of women who identify as people of color, who may have experienced gendered racism in certain forms, that certainly is a unique experience. MST-related recovery can be affected by a range of different social phenomena: sexism, gendered racism, ageism, homophobia, heterosexism, workplace hostility, ableism. Really, I think when we consider any of the isms or the obias, I guess is how I would describe kind of what's associated with these varied intersecting identities. The complexities around that can certainly make an already complicated and challenging experience of military sexual trauma that much more complicated and challenging. I did want to say a little bit about military sexual trauma survivors who identify as Black, Indigenous, and people of color. As again, they're they experience, their experience of trauma is shaped by their experience of oppression in US society. And there has been research that shows that they do experience MST related behaviors at different rates from white service member counterparts. There has been research that shows that there are differences in how Black women who are enlisted and who are officers experience military sexual trauma and the types of MST that is experienced compared to the experiences of white women who are enlisted and officers as well. And certainly contributing factors can include certain cultural stereotypes that sexualize people of diverse races and gender, diversity around rank, types of MST experienced, and the compounding form of other forms of oppression, as we had discussed in the last slide. Okay, and the VA actually, in response to much of the racial trauma and race-related stress that had been experienced and come to the forefront in our society in the last, I'd say maybe really kind of galvanized since George Floyd, his death. Excuse me. They developed a brochure, and as a big part of the brochure, they compiled information, firsthand accounts and quotes from veterans who identify as people of color, and wanted to highlight the voices of survivors as it relates to the intersections of race and ethnicity with military sexual trauma. And I just want to read one quote. Really, this booklet is primarily geared towards clinicians and really encourages clinicians to understand the ways in which discrimination, racial oppression impacts the experiences of MST survivors. And so we as providers can educate ourselves on how to discuss these issues in affirming ways. So I'll just read this, quote on the side. I think the main thing that providers can do is bring the issue of race and ethnicity forward. Ask veterans if that could have been a factor in their experience of MST and listen to their explanations. Let them know, hey, we know that this could have been a factor. Could you expand on that? And I really wanted to highlight that quote in large part because something that we know as military sexual trauma services coordinators and as VA providers is how important it is for people to know that they are seen, validated, heard, and that their experiences are respected and that they are believed. I think it was somewhere in my slides, but the slogan for the last few years put out by the National MST Support Team has been, "We believe you and we believe in you." And certainly that is very important when we think about people who have experienced other forms of marginalization in society, in addition to sexual violence in their military service. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the next set of myths. Diagnosed with MST and need treatment or service connection for my MST. So if there is, I hope you'll take a lot from this event, but if there is one thing you take from this event, it is to keep in mind that military sexual trauma is an event, it's an experience, it's a form of trauma. It is not a diagnosis. And the reason why I want to emphasize that is that it can result in a range of different mental health and medical concerns. I am aware that when I talk with survivors who may or may not be diagnosed with PTSD, for example, they talk about feeling incredibly invalidated because of the lack of diagnosis, and that also reflects a lack of recognition for the significance of the event. And PTSD, just like depression, anxiety themselves, are diagnosed conditions. Just like you wouldn't diagnose somebody with a car accident, you wouldn't diagnose somebody with military sexual trauma. Is there a question? I thought I saw a hand. No.
Sorry, you lost audio, but you're back.
Oh, I did. Okay.
Just briefly.
Okay. All right. So if there's something you missed in there, please let me know and I'll, yeah, I can always like reiterate it. Thank you. Thank you, Suzanne. So again, experiences of military sexual trauma can affect individuals in various ways with respect to their health. It can also affect housing stability, substance use recovery, relationships, career and education goals, and engagement or access to healthcare. And I do want to mention that because that has direct implications for what people can access when it comes to the Veterans Health Administration. And it is not just limited to one diagnosis or one particular kind of set of concerns. So this is just a restating of my slides, and I believe they'll be made available for folks. So if you didn't catch something, then certainly we'll get access to this information later. But here are just a few of the mental health conditions and medical conditions that have been found to be affected by military sexual trauma. And when we say affected, when we say resulting in, keep in mind we're talking about the event, the MST has to be shown to be caused by or exacerbated by the event. So, sorry, the condition has to be caused by or exacerbated by the event. So if I have depression, I've experienced military sexual trauma, and it worsens my depression, that would be something that we recognize as a condition associated with or related to military sexual trauma, and the VA provides care for those resources. I can explain that in more detail later. I'm going to move past this slide. Really just want to emphasize that there is not one diagnosis associated with MST. PTSD is most commonly associated, but they've done research on the more common diagnoses, and I believe depression and anxiety are close seconds in terms of service-connected conditions. So there are a range of factors that impact a survivor's reactions, including the characteristics of the actual experience itself. Did it happen once? Did it happen multiple times? Did somebody have the experience or exposure to other forms of trauma, or MST only? The extent, severity, who the person who perpetrated the event was, and whether or not they were known are some factors that can affect the survivor's reactions. We talked a little bit already about characteristics of the individual in terms of identities, developmental level, a time of event when many people go into the military, whether it's into academy or whether it's enlisting, they go in right around that transitional time that is significant for adulthood, right around that like kind of post-high school, 18, 19 years old. So certainly that plays a big role in shaping, for some people, their reactions as survivors. And then also characteristics of the environment. How does the environment respond, if at all, at the time? And what resources are made available? What resources are understood to be available? All of these factors contribute to survivors' particular reactions and to the conditions that may result from military sexual trauma. Okay, I'm going to move along to talk a little bit about how the VA specifically helps survivors. And one thing that I always want to emphasize is where I am located as MST coordinator in the whole VA structure. So VA has 3 branches, Department of Veterans Affairs has 3 branches, the benefits side, the healthcare administration, which is the hospitals and medical centers, et cetera, and the cemeteries. You can see through my little teal arrow in support of Sexual Assault Awareness and Prevention Month that I am located in the health administration portion of the VA. And I always want to emphasize that because my role as MST coordinator is to help connect people with care. Even though I may know some aspects of the benefits and claims process, I'm happy to leave that discussion to Carmen a little bit later because it is incredibly important to understand and to know where you can get access to those resources. My role primarily is to get people access to treatment or to help people find outlets for treatment and support in whatever way that shows up. So there are a number of different responses that the VA has compiled over years to offer support to veterans who've experienced military sexual trauma, including screening of all veterans, regardless of whether or not we believe they've experienced MST, free healthcare. So healthcare is provided free of charge for any condition considered to be exacerbated or caused by the MST event. Coordinators like myself at every medical center, a national support team that answers the incredibly tough, complicated questions, and then consistent education, training, and outreach for staff and veterans and service members. So in my role, I serve as a point person for MST issues at the facility. If I don't know the answer, my popular response is, I don't know the answer, but let me figure out how to get that for you. Because there are so many different scenarios and so many different unique circumstances for individuals. And they're not all covered on one page of a website or on kind of one section of an eligibility booklet. Some MST coordinators provide clinical care, some do not provide clinical care, much like with the kind of saying about the VA, if you've seen one VA, you've seen one VA. If you've seen one MST coordinator, you've seen one MST coordinator. There certainly is some overlap, but we do things slightly different in response to the needs of our community of veterans and former service members in terms of how we support issues related to military sexual trauma. But one thing that is the same is that we are best point of contact for accessing MST-related care, answering any questions regarding that. I'm going to move on through the screening because I have a feeling I think I should be getting like some type of a time check at some, just making sure. Okay, all right, I think I saw a nod from somebody. And really just emphasize that we are asking and we are required to ask all people who have experience, who have come in to establish VA care in any way, shape, or form, whether or not they've experienced military sexual trauma. We don't want to presume under any circumstances. If somebody tells us no, we certainly will take them at their word with that. If somebody tells us no, yes, we will take them at their word with that. But we do know that many, again, as I'd mentioned before, many people who have experienced military sexual trauma don't always tell the first person that asks them and completes the screening with them. That many times the person they do tell is a provider or another staff member or a colleague, somebody that they've built up a sense of connection with and somebody who they feel that they can open up to. And so by asking everybody, we're making sure that we're casting the widest net possible in terms of access to care, but we're also doing it in sensitive ways and to show, hey, we're here and we're aware about the sensitivity of this topic. And from there, when we do the screening, people are referred on to the appropriate services. Another myth to put out there is because I did not report my MST event during active duty service, I can't get treatment. With respect to VA care, that is absolutely not true. You do not have to have proof that you experienced military sexual trauma. The burden of proof is not on the survivor. It's not on the person who experienced military sexual trauma. You don't need to have reported it. You didn't need to file an open or closed investigation. You don't need to have had initiated care or connection with the VA or attempted to file a claim, et cetera, within a certain time period in order to qualify for VA related care. There are some caveats, I will say, with respect to folks who serve in the Guard and reserves. And again, as MST coordinator, my job, my responsibility is to make sure that I'm asking those questions to people who spend much more of their time trying to figure out the complexities of an already complicated system and trying to get somebody some form of connection or support as much as possible.
Give a 10-minute warning.
Thank you so much. So again, if I don't qualify for VA care, I can't get treatment for MST related conditions, not necessarily. So the things that one thing I want to emphasize is that MST related healthcare is expansive and it is free of charge for somebody who has disclosed that they've experienced military sexual trauma based on the earlier definition. The VA recently, well, not so recently now, I think it's been a few years, opened up access to care for veterans and former service members who have an other than honorable discharge status or uncharacterized discharge status. They are now eligible for care if they've experienced military sexual trauma. Current service members, we also have ways to help get them connected if they have previously experienced military sexual trauma. Although in some instances, there may be authorization where we have to work with the Department of Defense. But with respect to MST related eligibility, there's no length of service or income requirements. We just talked a little bit about the discharge status piece that kind of complicates things a little bit when we talk about, and probably will be discussed later when we talk about benefits as well. But our aim with the VA, Veterans Health Administration, is to make sure that the VA is not blocking access to care if somebody could benefit, and we're not limiting care eligibility based on the kind of standard VA kind of care criteria. And again, you don't have to file a service-connected claim for service connection to access care. You could access care while you're in the midst of doing service connection claim. And for many people, that looks different, really, from person to person. Some people never pursue a claim. Some people come in having had completed the claims process. So let's see, I would like to highlight from this slide, again, this is just another restating because we really want to emphasize how expansive VA care is for people who've experienced military sexual trauma. Actually, I think the other thing I want to emphasize is that there may be some limits on the way that care is delivered, but ultimately the aim is to make sure that we are getting people access, particularly for mental health support, although there are ways to get support for medical related conditions as well. Another myth, kind of myth with an asterisk that I want to emphasize is I have to see somebody who specializes in MST for my mental health care. Again, because MST is an event, it's not a diagnosis, it can result in or exacerbate a range of different mental health and medical concerns. And so somebody who experiences military sexual trauma may need support and can benefit from care through various mental health clinics affiliated with a VA or affiliated with an outpatient clinic as well. I always tell people in my role as MST coordinator, I can't be the only person to see people for MST related care, because if I do, I will never eat, I will never sleep, I'll never leave the VA, and I still won't get to serve everybody who wants and needs access to care. And so we really rely on educating, training those mental health providers that work within and outside of the VA on the skills they need and information they need to address conditions related to MST. And then if there are really complicated or specific questions or people need consultation, that's where I come in to provide support. So some hospitals do have an MST clinic or team. The DC VA, we do not. We have a trauma services program, but not everybody who has experienced military sexual trauma is treated for or is eligible for that program. So we really rely on making sure we have providers who are knowledgeable and can offer the full continuum of mental health services. These can range from outpatient related services, evaluation, assessment, also psychiatry, individual and group psychotherapy, also specialty services that may target co-occurring problems like substance use, homelessness, employment concerns. The vet centers, which are a wonderful segment of the Veterans Health Administration, are outposts that specifically work with and provide counseling to veterans who have experienced military sexual trauma in part. And there is also gender specific and also mixed gender programming available based on individuals' needs and preferences. There are VAs that do have access to and have established residential programs, but there are also a number of different community programs that I'm seeing coming up now who are really seeking to outreach and provide support to veterans who have experienced military sexual trauma and are not necessarily affiliated with the VA, but may be eligible for like VA community care coverage. I also mentioned briefly staff support, education, and training. Here's a little bit of an example of this. I'm not going to bore you with all the staff related stuff. Just want to emphasize that we do it. It is important. It is required. You can see in some of the pictures for outreach and education, those are pictures of the clothesline, they're very small, pictures of the clothesline projects that have occurred at different VA medical centers around the country as part of awareness of recognition of sexual assault awareness and prevention month. And we do a lot work with the national team to get a lot of the outreach done and the word out about VA resources. Again, it is, thank you very much. Okay, VA provides MST care free of charge. There's no charge for MST related conditions for the visits associated with those conditions. You go to the VA and ask for an eye exam and it's a routine eye exam and it's not related to MST, then that is charged. But care related to MST related conditions is provided free of charge. There is a link that I believe was or will be shared with information on the VA's MST informational website. There are also a number of educational and self-help resources. I really love the About Face section of the National Center for PTSD, and I have the links to the slides later on with the packet that you'll receive because it provides firsthand accounts and firsthand words from veterans and former service members who have experienced military sexual trauma and have sought treatment in various forms. The VA also has a lot of different apps. The App Store is a great resource. There's a QR code in the slides later. And one resource that I really want to make sure to emphasize is the Beyond MST app. So this is created by the National MST Support Team, and it is a trauma-informed app. It includes oodles of information about VA-related MST questions, about broader questions regarding military sexual trauma, coping strategies, ways to reduce stress, information where you can save your provider's name. So this is something that I always refer survivors to right off the bat when I speak with them directly. So again, QR code is located later, but yeah, take a picture, do whatever your QR code thing is that you do. It's cool. And then again, there are different community resources, and the DoD has a very detailed website as well, too. So to summarize, again, military sexual trauma is defined at base as any unwanted sexual attention or contact that occurs against someone's will. It affects service members, former service members, veterans, retirees across a range of different identities. VA provides treatment for mental health and medical conditions free of charge related to military sexual trauma. And again, really, the person just needs to say, yes, I've experienced this. We don't ask, well, what kind, well, how long, we don't ask any of those details. Really, it's just that the person acknowledges that they've experienced it. I'm a go-to resource for information on MST related services, and there's a number of different other online resources. So hopefully I came in some form of time. Okay, I got the thumbs up from Cassandra. And just want to thank you again for allowing me to address your group tonight. Thank you so much to the Survivor Advocacy Network. You all are phenomenal, and it's been such a treat to partner with you. And also just want to say thanks to the people where I'm at for the support they provide me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Whittaker. That was incredible. You answered almost all of the questions that people had put in when they registered, but I wanted